Our next guest is Brittany Clingen from Ballotpedia, and this is going to be a discussion which is really a continuation of a topic we started on a few shows ago, and to demonstrate the importance of voting and the repercussions of not voting. We talked about the last general election where we showed there were 80-some million people didn't bother to vote and how that compared to the percentages that elected the president. And we've had a segment on school boards where we've talked about really a pathetic level of turnout for school boards that represent our most important product, which is education and education of our children. Today we're going to do a new twist on this topic and talk about special elections, special ballot measures, special issues, and how lack of voter impact is really affecting some really critical topics. So, Brittany, you are with Ballotpedia, our favorite internet site. And at Ballotpedia, you're the Ballot Measures Project Director. So what is the Ballot Measures Project Director? It's a tongue twister for me today.
Yeah. So I am in charge of, essentially, we have a whole section of Ballotpedia dedicated to ballot measures. That's how Ballotpedia actually got started. So we cover all statewide measures. We also cover hot topic local measures. So we cover, all your kind of favorite hot button issues, from abortion to marijuana, same-sex marriage. We also cover all local measures in California, because California is a fun state for ballot measures. And we're also working on putting together a database of historical ballot measures that will go back to 1900 all the way through the present. So we'll be able to get some historical data on ballot measures since the beginning of the early 1900s.
And what would be the purpose of looking back in history? To get trends, or to...
Yes, yeah. We are looking to get trends on the types of issues that have been voted on, proposed for the ballot, whether those issues have been approved, what lawsuits have been filed against these issues, just a whole database of historical information that can help us analyze present-day voter issues.
So when you have the topic of special issues, how do you define that? Is there a definition for that group, that category?
Yeah, we're still kind of working on developing a set rubric on how we define that. Right now, we look at what measures are getting a lot of media attention, particularly on the local level, because at the state level we cover all the measures, regardless of how hot button issue, how hot they are, essentially. But at the local level, there are far too many. We can't cover all of them, and there aren't the resources out there to cover all of them. So we look at what's getting a lot of media hits. We also will look at, so for example, in the past year or so, there has been a rash of fracking, local fracking ballot measures. And we're seeing a trend toward that particular issue. So we would look for that issue in other states. So for example, a municipality in Illinois actually is going to have potentially have a ballot measure on fracking, which is the first time that will happen in Illinois. There were several in Colorado and Ohio last year. So we kind of followed trends with respect to what the issue is.
So you're talking about issues that, really very hot button issues, heaters as we call them, but people aren't turning out to vote.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the tricky thing is, obviously, when you're looking at voter turnout has historically been highest during presidential election years, then followed by even-numbered years. So, for example, 2014 midterm election. And the odd number years, we historically have seen the lowest voter turnout. But in reality, some of the ballot measures that are covered and that people vote on in the off years, so for example, like in 2013, those often will have a more significant and tangible effect on residents of a particular state or municipality than will the decision as to who the next president is. So I think ballot measures sometimes get put on the back burner. They're not quite as glamorous. There are no sex scandals or drug scandals. Ballot measures can't go out and talk to people and introduce themselves. So sometimes I think people just kind of dismiss them, or other times they can be dense and difficult to understand. So that's where Ballotpedia comes in. We try to break down the issues, make sure that everybody understands what's going on, understands both sides of the issue. So we're just kind of trying to raise awareness that these ballot measures, particularly the ones in the off years, can be very important and should be voted on.
Now, the cynical side of me is used to seeing these issues, as you said, maybe during a presidential term or an even numbered year, because one of the parties is trying to drive turnout for an election. How do these issues come up in an odd number year? What is that about?
Oh, well, and that really does play a large part. For example, in 2013, there was a gambling ballot measure in New York, and Governor Cuomo was a big supporter of this measure. He was actually attempting to get it moved to the 2014 ballot because he was concerned that voter turnout wasn't going to be high enough. So some ballot measure campaigns will wait until an even numbered year to try to put their issue on the ballot because they are worried about voter turnout. So an example of that actually happened this past election in November 2013. Washington State saw the lowest voter turnout in a decade. So it was 45.27% in 2013, and in 2003 it was at around 40%. So it's the lowest it's been in a decade. Now, there were not any what you would call traditional hot button issues on the ballot. There weren't any marijuana measures, there weren't any same-sex marriage measures. However, there was one measure, Washington I-522, that addressed whether or not food with GMOs, genetically modified organisms, should be labeled. It should be a mandatory labeling process. So this campaign ended up being the most expensive ballot measure campaign in the history of the state. Between the support and opposition sides, over $31 million was raised for this ballot measure campaign. And less than half of the registered voters turned out to vote for it. And Washington is also an all mail-in ballot state, so people don't even have to go to the polls. They are sent their ballots. Their ballots are sent to them in the mail, and they have a certain amount of time. It has to be postmarked by the election day, but it requires very little effort on the part of the voter, and still the voter turnout was only 45%. So
this was decided by 23% of the voter turnout. I mean, 23% of the, half of 45 won this.
Yes. So the total turnout. So the total number of it was 45% of the registered.
The registered, voters. Right.
Right, and then an even smaller portion actually, voted for the issue. So that's another similar example happened again this past November in San Francisco. There was Proposition A, which sought to remedy a $4.4 billion shortfall in the city's retiree health care fund. So a $4.4 billion shortfall in a city of approximately 825,000 people, that's a big deal. It's very detrimental to the fiscal health of the city. So of the approximately 825,000 residents, there are 489,000 who are registered to vote, and only 120,793 turned out and voted on Proposition A.
So if I'm doing my math correctly, 15% of the potential voters turned out to vote.
So my number, I got 24.7 registered voters turned out to vote.
Okay.
And then the proposition was approved by only 16.9% of registered voters. So of those who came out to vote, 68% of those who voted on it approved it. But once you break all the numbers down, it turns out that only 16.9% of voters in the city decided this important issue for every resident.
And again, you were doing your math off of registered voters. I was quickly trying to do some mental math off of the total possible voters.
Yes, yes.
So what do you attribute this to? This is, as you said, in the one case, $31 million was spent.
Correct.
and then no one votes. What's going on here?
I think part of it is, people are not engaged. They're not interested in these issues. They don't see how these issues might affect them. So I think part of it is we need to get people to realize that actually even some of these non-glamorous ballot measures will have an impact on your day-to-day life. It's kind of interesting because if you will, kind of the emotional issues, abortion, same-sex marriage, those are issues that most people don't have to do a lot of research. They know where they stand on these issues. But when it comes to things like labeling GMOs or raising taxes, adjusting property taxes, these concepts and issues are not necessarily as easy to understand. There's not that emotional reaction. And so I think a lot of people just don't want to take the time to try to first research the information and then understand it and decide where they fall on the issue.
Well, again, they may not want to research, but when someone's spending $31 million, they're probably getting bombarded with data. And as you said, they're probably coming to them on the TV and the radio and in the mail. All they have to do is go to their post office box and, drop it in.
Right. No, and that is the crazy thing, because that particular campaign, both sides, the support and the opposition, ran a ton of TV ads. We have a whole page on Ballotpedia dedicated just to the ads that each side ran. With that particular GMO measure in Washington, some of the supporters do think that if there had been higher voter turnout, they would have won. So this year, voters in Oregon, or residents in Oregon, are trying to get a similar GMO measure on the ballot, and they're hoping that because 2014 is an even-numbered year, voter turnout will be higher, and they're hoping that that might help with the success of their measure. We'll see if that is the case.
Well, it's unfortunate that we're not getting these turnouts, and as you said, it's unfortunate that you have critical issues being decided by such a very small percentage of the population.
Right.
I'm not sure what the answer is for that, but if someone wants to learn more about this and get educated, how do they find your research on Ballotpedia and, drill down and maybe get issue specific if they want?
Right. So if you just go to the homepage, which is ballotpedia.org, you will see a map of the United States, and then off to the side, on the right side, there's a row of different projects. Ballotpedia covers a wide array of projects: Congress, school boards, state executives, and ballot measures. We're the Ballot Measures Project. So if you click on that little word, ballot measures, it will bring you to the Ballot Measures portal. And there we have tabs. It breaks it down by state issues, local issues, the historical database I was talking about. We also cover some local recalls. And then you can also click on the Ballot Measures portal has another map of the United States where you can click on your state and see what's on your ballot for 2014.
Well, Brittany, I greatly appreciate your time. You're a great spokesperson for this issue. And one of the things we're pushing for, of course, on None of the Above is to get people active on issues. So if they go to your page, they can actually see these issues and maybe get excited about something. And chances are, like you said, fracking or whatever, it's coming to their state sometime soon, so they might as well get educated and see how things are. So thank you for your time, and say hello to all our friends back at Ballotpedia.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.